the best, worst podcast you've ever heard. And now, The Ronnie and Bo Show, brought to you by Prescott Realty.
It's Ronnie and Bo.
Hello, folks.
Hey, Ronnie, we might have to change the name of this episode. From the Ronnie and Bo Show to the Ronnie, Bo, and Tom Show.
I'm okay with that.
This is going to be a lot of fun. We got Tom Dreesen coming up in just a couple of seconds.
Legendary comedian. And this episode's brought to you by Prescott Realty. You can give them a call today at 928-499-8700. They can cover all of your house buying or selling needs in the greater Prescott area, so give them a call.
So, Tom, thank you very much for spending some time with us today.
Happy to do it, Bo. You're an old friend. I've known you now 87 years. I looked at the calendar.
No, we didn't. No? Not that long. 52
must have been
years.
Someone else, Bo.
52. What? So, Tom, we got so much to talk to you about, and I don't know if we should just do it chronologically. You know, you grew up in Chicago area, right?
I grew up in a suburb on the south side of Chicago called Harvey, Illinois. It's on the south side in the steel mills, factories. You know, they made everything from clutch plates to crankshafts. They had 38 taverns in the town. You know, I shined shoes in taverns. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. Wow. I sold newspapers on the corner to help feed my brothers and sisters. I had 8 brothers and sisters. We grew up kind of poor, lived in a shack. You know,
wow,
raggedy poor.
You were shining shoes when you heard your first Sinatra song, wasn't it? Is that close?
Yeah, and all the taverns in my neighborhood, you know, Frank was on every jukebox. He was obviously a big favorite in saloons his whole career, you know. And so when I was shining shoes, I would hear him singing, you know, the men of the neighborhood love Sinatra, you know, in Chicago. And in the bars, and the women, I must say. But that's why, in fact, my one-man show, to go a little forward on you, I do a 90-minute show called An Evening of Laughter and Memories of Sinatra. And it's a show where the theater goes dark, and on the screen, Dennis Farina, God rest his soul, narrates my life, about 3.5 minutes of my life. Then I come out and I do stand-up comedy for about 25 minutes, and I segue over to a bar. And there's a bottle of Jack Daniels on the bar because that was Frank's drink of choice.
Yeah.
And I tell a funny joke at the bar, and the audience laughs, and all the lights go out, and Frank is on the screen singing. It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. You know, the saloon song. When he gets to the chorus, make it one for my baby and one more for the road. The spotlight hits me, and he goes off screen. And now I'm in the bar with the audience, and I've come home. And I tell him the first time I heard that voice, I was 8 years old, shining shoes in a bar on the south side of Chicago, and he was on the jukebox. And I take the audience from that little boy hearing Sinatra on the jukebox on the south side of Chicago to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California.
Wow.
I take them on a journey with pictures and video on the screen. You know, the story I tell, I have pictures and video authenticating the stories. So it's a lot of fun. It's a fun evening.
Wow. Tom, what do you think it was about Frank? I mean, you opened for him for years and obviously knew him really well, were involved in his memorial as a pallbearer. I mean, what do you think it was about him that was such iconic, legendary, whatever huge descriptors we want to put to him, as somebody that spent time with him, what was that about?
First of all, he was arguably the greatest pop singer of all time. So you know, there's no question. It's not even arguably. Steve Lawrence once said to him, Steve Lawrence, who's a great singer, once said to him, "You know, you ruined it for all the rest of us." You know, because once they heard you sing it, they knew how it was supposed to be done.
Wow.
But the other thing was, he was a brilliant actor. He won the Academy Award in From Here to Eternity, and he never took an acting lesson in his life. He danced with Gene Kelly, for God's sake. You know, he should have won the Academy Award in The Man with the Golden Arm, or The Manchurian Candidate, or a movie called Suddenly. He was a brilliant actor. So when you gave him a song, to him it was a script.
Yeah.
What did the writer feel the night the writer took pen in hand? He would immerse himself in the lyric and become that lonely guy in the bar whose woman left him and he's never going to find love again.
Yeah.
So you felt that because he was an actor acting out these scripts, you know, and as well as the joy of the songs, you know, Come Fly With Me and stuff. Yeah. But even above all that, there was a mystique about him. You know, I mean, you know, the interesting thing is that I could talk, and I do, to groups sometimes about Frank Sinatra for an hour and a half. And then I'll say, any questions? And the first question from the audience will say, I'll say, yes. The person will say, was Frank Sinatra in the Mafia?
Oh, man.
And the thing was, because did he know those guys? Of course, the answer to that question is no, but did he know those guys? Of course. They owned all the clubs in those days. They owned Las Vegas. I mean, I worked for those guys. It's part of the business that we were in.
Right,
so, but that mystique about him as well, so he was larger than life. And he had this incredible skill that he could walk out in front of 20,000 people. 20,000 people. And in moments, he would bring it all down where the guy in the furthest row felt like he was in a bar with Frank.
Wow.
And Frank was singing to him.
Yep.
And the last thing, think about this. How many artists, he was a star well over 60 years. In his 70s, in his late 70s, he sold out in Moscow. He sold out in Argentina. He sold out in Brazil. He sold out in Japan.
Yeah.
What American artist has ever done that?
Yeah, exactly. I think I saw a clip of old footage from the Japan show, and that's what I'm thinking. I mean, way back then, just going, my goodness, that's what a gift to be able to translate across all those cultural and language and all those different barriers, because there was something just so special about him as an artist.
And he's the greatest interpreter of lyrics that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
You knew exactly. You felt the things that he was singing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that about his scripts. He also, and then you just tied it in right there with the lyrics. I mean, he was feeling it all, right? Selling.
Oh
it,
yeah, I listen to I listen to him all the time in the car, and there's times you catch, just little subtle things. There was a song he had called Cycles, and it was a beautiful song, but he said, but I'll keep my head up high, although I'm kind of tired. Even when he sings the word tired, you feel that word.
Yeah. That's
So
really cool.
So you mentioned,
master.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're a shoe shine boy in Harvey, Illinois, listening to him on the jukebox, and then of course you talk about spending a life with him, and then helping at the memorial as a pallbearer. Explain to us how did you get involved with him?
Well, first of all, for 6 years I was touring the nation as the opening. Tim Reid and I were America's first black and white comedy team.
Yeah.
And so when that team broke up, I went out to the West Coast and I slept in an old Nash Rambler, hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, begging to work for free at the Comedy Store.
Yeah.
And it took a year, but I got involved, and got the Tonight Show to come and see me. And that first Tonight Show changed my whole life.
What year was that, Tom?
1975.
Wow.
December 1975. And then when I got that first Tonight Show, my whole life changed. I all of a sudden I was doing Dinah Shore, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand, Hollywood Squares, $20,000 Pyramid. I was doing all those shows.
Yeah.
And there was a TV show called Sammy and Company that I really wanted to do, Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I ended up doing that show, and Sammy liked me, and he said, I'm taking you on the road with me, and he took me on the road for 3 years. Wow. And so I toured with Sammy, and he of course talked about Frank a great deal.
Right.
And I had never met Frank at that time. Now after I quit touring with Sammy, I started touring with Smokey Robinson and different artists. And now I was touring with Smokey, and we were in Caesars in Lake Tahoe, and Frank Sinatra was appearing next door at Harrah's.
Wow.
And I left the stage one night after my show and bolted straight over to Harrah's Hotel because I had worked there many times. They had a seat waiting for me, and I was rushing into the showroom when the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, standing outside the showroom, saw me. His name was Holmes Hendrickson, and he said, Tommy, come here. And he was with a big heavyset guy with a cigar. And he said, Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin, R-U-D-I-N, Mickey Rudin. And I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer.
Wow.
And a very powerful guy in our industry.
Yeah.
He said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen. I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he'd heard it a million times. He said he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. He said, hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? And I looked at him and I said, Mr. Rudin, put it this way: if you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? and he started laughing. He said, I like this kid. And then a week later, they called me and said, would you like to work with Frank in Atlantic City at the Golden Nugget for 1 week? And I thought, yeah, I'll get my picture taken with him, try to hang it in every bar back in Chicago. and then the second night I was with him, he and his wife took me out to dinner. I can remember like it was yesterday. In the middle of the meal, he put his knife and his fork down, and he said, I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested. And I didn't say, let me check my calendar.
Yeah,
I said,
right.
yeah, sure. And it turned into 14 years of 45, 50 cities a year.
Wow.
And a great friendship, and I miss him every day.
I bet.
Hey,
I bet.
can you share that story? Last time you and I spoke, you were talking about a story about there was a dinner, I think it was at Frank's house, and there were about 6 or 8 couples around, and they were asking where you want to live in the world or something like that. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, it was on his birthday, his 82nd birthday, and he had only he passed away 5 months later, and so he was quite ill, and everybody was there. All of it, Gregory Peck and his wife Veronique, and Jack Lemmon and his wife Felicia, and Sidney Poitier and Joanne, his wife, and it was Angie Dickinson and Robert Wagner, Joe St. John, all of his friends, and the dinner was over, and they were waiting for the cake to come out and making small talk, and Frank was off to the side. There were times when he was with us, and there were times he wasn't. Like I say, he passed away 5 months later, so we weren't quite sure if he was with us that day. And in the making small talk, somebody said, "Where's the best place to live?" And Gregory Peck said, "Well, Veronique and I have a villa in France, and we like it there." And Robert Wagner and Joe St. John said, "We have a place in Aspen, and we like it there." And Frank, off to the side with his head down, said, "The best place to live is where your friends are."
Wow.
And everybody stopped and went, whoa, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, of course that's so. But my point of that story is, here's a guy who accomplished incredible things, amassed a fortune, won the Oscars and Emmys and Grammys, and he won all these awards, and in the end, it wasn't about any of those things. It was about friendships.
A great perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you came up through the Comedy Store ranks. I think you were part of a good group, Jay Leno and David Letterman. Were you guys all hanging out there about the same time?
No, yeah, I was on stage every night with all these unknown comedians.
Right.
David Letterman, Jay Leno, Robin Williams, Gallagher, Michael Keaton. The girl waiting tables was Deborah Winger.
Jeez.
I don't know whatever happened to those guys, but I'm talking to Bo Woods right now.
That's too good.
You made many appearances on David Letterman. What were those like?
Well, I did 61 appearances on The Tonight Show. I did more on The Tonight Show.
Okay.
I did over 50 on Letterman, but David is a good buddy of mine. So he called me one time and said, "Hey, I want you to do my show and do it 3-4 times a year. And just come on and let's you and I tell stories and talk like we did in the old days when we were after our shows." And and so I did, and in fact, he even let me host the show when he had the shingles.
Right.
Whenever he got sick, so every time I'd see him, I'd say, "You don't look so good. You need to take some time off." It was always fun doing it, Dave, because these are guys like Jay and David. These are guys I started out. We didn't have a nickel to our name. We were, afterward we'd go to a restaurant called Cantor's after we worked at Comedy Store.
Oh yeah.
And we'd sit down and try to come up with enough money for coffee and something to eat.
Yeah.
And now here these guys are vastly successful, and it was just a joy to be with them.
What about your time with Tim Reid, Tom? How did that come about?
Tim, what happened was when I came out of the service, I was joined a civic group called the JCs, Junior Chamber of Commerce. And they work on the ills of the community, the problems of the community, their leadership training programs, teach you how to serve on a committee, how to chair a committee. And anyhow, one of the problems facing our youth in those days, of course, were drugs, as it is today.
Right.
So I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor. Was a concept I had.
Wow.
Working with me on this project was a young black man named Tim Reid, who just graduated from Norfolk State College in Norfolk, Virginia, and E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago as a marketing rep, and he joined the JCs. So he wanted to work with me on the project. And we worked on the project, and the program became very successful. They weren't teaching drug education in those days at a college level or a high school level, let alone at an elementary school level. So the program became number 1 in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries through JC's publications on how to teach drug education at an elementary school level. And one day, a little 8th grade girl walking out of the classroom, because we used to make the kids laugh, and we'd play film and stuff like that, play records. And as they were leaving the classroom, one little girl said to Tim and I, "You guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team."
Wow.
And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us because there had never been one before.
Right.
And there's never been one since. that was 45 years ago.
Wow,
Tim and
especially back then. I mean,
it was pretty important. More important than the comedy part.
Did you face any backlash or people not
yeah,
put up with it?
You kidding me? This was 1969, September of 69.
Wow.
So next year will be 50 years I've been in the business. But in those, the Robert Kennedy was just assassinated. Martin Luther King was just assassinated.
Gosh.
The civil rights had only been passed 5 years previously, and it's still, the nation was loaded with Jim Crow laws and stuff. And we were going across the land. There were race riots in all the major cities. Students were protesting the Vietnam War. I had just gotten out of the service. And the nation was in turmoil. In the middle of all this, we were going across the land trying to make people laugh.
Yeah.
As America's first black and white comedy team, we did 11 prisons in 1 year.
Wow.
We did, wherever there was racial tension, we would go. And we didn't preach. We'd just go try to make people laugh.
Right.
By the way, Ronnie, a book called Tim and Tom, an American comedy in black and white. It was released
that's the name of the
a
book.
couple of years ago.
You can get it on Amazon now, but it's a real good book. And now we're hoping it's going to become a movie. We've got some script out, and we're trying to push that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then he went on to WKRP, and I mean, you've had your fair share of television appearances and whatnot. Columbo. Murder, She Wrote. I was a tour guide at Universal Studios for a while, and that was the one show that on the backlot tram ride had filmed on every single location of that backlot. We were just waiting for Angela Lansbury, The Ride, to come out. But yeah.
I did Murder, She Wrote a couple times. I did one real good fun scene with her, and she was just such a superb actress to work with. She actually directed the scene, even though she wasn't a director.
Yeah.
She just came up to me and said, "Tom, this is what we are trying to accomplish in this scene." And I was a cab driver taking her to the racetrack.
Wow.
And she said, "I'm trying to get away from you, but you're a gabby cab driver, and I'm trying to get away from you, and your words are holding me. You're not holding me physically, but I can't get away from you because your words." I said, "You don't know, Angela, but you sure got the right guy for this role."
Typecast, huh?
Tim did Simon and Simon,
right.
WKRP. He was on a show called Sister, Sister. He's done more sitcoms probably than any actor out there.
Yeah.
I don't know how to phrase this question, but looking at your comedy and comedy today, I mean, obviously there's progress in any industry, right? What are some differences? Do you notice anything? Do you worry about any differences between what you guys had to do and how you had to create compared to how they're doing it today?
Well, several things. Number one, in 1975, wherever you went in America, people say, "What do you do for a living?" You say, "I'm a stand-up comedian." The next question out of their mouth was, "Oh, yeah? You ever been on Johnny Carson?" If you hadn't been on Johnny Carson, in the eyes of America, you weren't a comedian. So 22 million people watched that show in those days, so you had to get on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a businessman, and we're in show business, that's two words,
right.
Show and business, you say, "Well, how do I get on the Tonight Show?" You'd look and you'd say, "I have to work clean. I have to write material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh."
Right.
Today, when cable television came out, you could work as filthy as you want, and you'd have a sitcom the next day. That's the extreme difference. The language, I'll digress for a moment to illustrate a point. I was at the Laugh Factory trying out some new material a while back, and I was upstairs waiting to go on, and two young comedians were around the corner, and they didn't know that I was there. And they were talking, and loud enough so I could hear them. One of them said, "Tom Dreesen is here." And the other comedian said, "Oh, yeah, he's old school." And the other kid said, "He's old school? What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he doesn't use the F word." And the other comedian said, "He doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives?"
Oh, man.
And I stuck my head around the corner, and I said to them, "Adjectives." That's what I use for adjectives.
Yeah.
Now, so that's my point. The comics of today, the language is just incredible, and I mean, female or male. But you know what? I'm not a prude. I don't have a degree from academia.
Right.
I got a doctorate from the streets.
Yeah.
I grew up on the streets. So you're not going to shock me.
Right.
And if you're using the F word to shock me, my grandmother says the F word, so you're not shocking her either. So try to be a little bit more creative. Now, the other thing, going back to what I said earlier, what's the difference? Another story. If you say years ago, if somebody said, "What do you do for a living?" and I say, "I'm a comedian," they would go, "Wow, Martha, honey, come here. Honey, he's a stand-up comedian." Today, people say, "What do you do for a living?" You say, "I'm a comedian." They say, "Yeah, so's my dentist. He does it on weekends." My wife's gynecologist does it too at Crackers over on weekends.
Yeah, exactly.
And now the third thing that is to the good there are now 10,000, 20,000 more comedians there ever were when we started out. But on the good side of that, there's comedy clubs all across the land, and so people can go get a laugh on weekends, and laughter is really good for you and healing. But the other thing is, there's a lot more different ethnic groups. There's an actual 5 Japanese-American comedians that will go out on the road on tour.
Wow.
And then there's 5 Korean comedians that will go out on tour. American kids of Japanese ethnicity the same way as Korean. There's 5 Middle Eastern comedians.
Yeah.
You know, Maximini and Maz Jabrani, and wonderful comedians. Middle Eastern, they go out on tour.
Yeah.
There's 5 black comedians going out on tour. You know, and that's the difference. When I started out in show business, comedians were predominantly Jewish.
Yeah, right.
You know, probably 80%.
Right.
You know, and for a reason, because Jews encourage humor in their children.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up Catholic, Irish, Italian.
Yeah.
You know, children were to be seen and not heard.
Right,
you know?
right.
And nuns didn't reward you with an ad lib. You know, they'd whip out that ruler on you. So we weren't encouraged, but Jewish children were encouraged. Be funny. You know, I used to caddy at an all-Jewish country club, and the member would say, "Tommy, come here. Listen, this is my nephew Sidney. He's 9 years old. Tell him what you said at dinner last night, Sidney. Listen to this, Tom. You're going to love it." So they encourage.
It's a cultural thing right from the get-go. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Tom, being a comedian yourself, but then having spent a great deal of your career with musical artists, is there any correlation between comedy and music?
Well, yeah, I would say timing. You know, Frank Sinatra had this incredible timing, metered songs. He you know, phrasing and timing, and the same thing applies to comedy.
Yeah.
I can teach you a lot of things, Bo. I mean, I do. I give classes sometimes. I give motivation speeches at universities and for corporate America, but I have a specific one I give to comedians. But I can teach young comedians a lot of things, joke structure and things like that. I can't teach you timing. I can help you with the lighting, with stage presence, but timing, you either have it or you don't. Yeah. And it's an innate gift. It's a God-given gift that you either have or you don't have.
So, Tom, I want to talk about the Chicago Cubs, but to get to the Chicago Cubs and what you do with them, I've got a perception of you. I think that you come over and work comedy clubs in the Phoenix area so that you can enjoy preseason games when the Cubs are in town. Is that close to accurate?
Well, I rarely ever work a comedy club in my life. Luckily I went from the Tonight Show straight into Vegas and touring with artists like that. So once in a great while, though, I will go work a place like I did go to Phoenix a while back, as you know, and I worked the Laugh Factory when it was there, so that I could sneak over to watch the Cubs play in Mesa. You know, although they're disappointing me day by day here lately.
Have faith. So you go, you travel back to Chicago. You're living in the L.A. area, I think. You travel back often to your hometown of the Chicago area. You sing the seventh inning stretch, things like that. How are you involved with the Cubs and you know, doing that kind of stuff? Tell some stories.
Years ago, I mean, I had such a relationship with them. I talked about the Cubs on every television show that I went on. I wore my Cub jacket on the Tonight Show one night, and so the Cubs made me the first president of the diehard Cub fan club, and then Jim Fry let me be bat boy 4 years in a row in the 80s. I'd do it for a week. I'd go back to Chicago and appear in a club, and all the players and their wives would come to the shows at night, because in those days they only played day games. So Jim Fry, when he was manager, let me be bat boy, and then I could hit batting practice and run around the outfield. It was great. And then when Harry Carey had the stroke, they let me announce a game. You know, with Steve Stone, I was able to get up there and announce the game, and Steve Stone helped me a lot. It was really great. And now I go back and I'll sing the 16th. They're playing Cincinnati, and I'll sing the seventh inning Sunday.
I love that.
September 16th.
That's so great.
And so I throw out the first pitch, and you know, I'm just a big Cub fan.
You're the honorary Cub.
I'm the honorary what?
Cub. Chicago Cub, right? Yeah.
That always went to Ernie Banks. He was the greatest Cub of them all. But
Right.
Cub fans are so as you know, so loyal, and so
It's great.
such good fans.
Hey, let's jump back a little bit. I want to ask you about did you make was your first comedy album That White Boy's Crazy?
My first, Tim Reid and I did a comedy album.
What was the name of that one?
Do you know? It was just Tim and Tom. I
Okay.
think was just the name of the album.
And then,
then I did one in front of an all-black audience because I grew up in a predominantly black area. I played basketball on an all-black basketball team, and I played football on an all-black football team.
how'd you do?
And so I grew up. I'll tell you, we used to play against Allgale Gardens.
Uh-huh.
Allgale Gardens is an all-black area in Chicago, and we would get off the bus and come running out, and there's like 22 football players on the field, and I'm the only white guy. And the Allgale Gardens, their chant, the Allgale Gardens fans, they would chant, "Give the white boy the ball! Give the white boy the ball!" And I was a running back, and they used to want to see me get hit, and I did too. I was a little guy. But I grew up with all that experience, and then of course Tim Reid and I worked all black clubs in the North and the South, what they affectionately call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. So because I was a white boy in that environment, I was able to, and because of my childhood, I got over. So every time I would go on the Tonight Show or Dinah Show or Merv Griffin or something, I'd do routines about growing up in a black neighborhood. White people would come up to me and say, "Do black people laugh at your material?"
What?
I got so tired of explaining that I went and did an album in front of an all-black audience.
Right.
Called That White Boy's Crazy, because, and then after that, whenever somebody say, "Do black people laugh at your material?" I'd whip out a CD and say, "Give me $10.99," and I'll
seriously.
Beautiful. Nice comeback. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you about your Tom Dreesen Celebrity Classic. You've got an annual golf tournament, right?
Yeah, I do it every year in Chicago. It's for the Illinois Fathers Initiative. That's my my charity, because of the lack of fathers in the home. We're trying to draw attention to that 3 out of every 10 white children born in America will have no father in the home, 5 out of every 10 Hispanic, no father in the home, and 7 out of every 10 African American, no father in the home.
Wow.
And therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
When we were growing up, where I grew up at my neighborhood, black kids, white kids, Irish kids, Italian kids, we were far more afraid of our fathers than we were of the police. Our father, the men ruled the neighborhood. The men,
right.
If a punk was getting out of line in the neighborhood, the men of that community went and got him and took him home to his dad. And that doesn't exist anymore. So that's what my charity is all about. I get about 15 comedians. They all come out and we all play with the amateurs, raise some money, and then we all go do a show for them.
That's great. So, Tom, you got a website, tomdreesen.com, and you got a lot of great things to look at. You got video clips. You've got posters of some of your shows and some of your work. You got a calendar on there. You got tabs on there where you do motivational speaking. You are MC things above and beyond of just doing stand-up, right?
Yeah, I do windows, Bo, I'll do that for you. I do windows. I can get, one of those leaf blowers and clean your yard up.
No, that's okay.
What about barber work? Because I don't know the last time you saw him, Tom, but he's got a beard that's creeping over the desk right now. It's so long. He could use a trim.
He's starting to look like David Letterman, huh?
Yeah,
David Letterman's
almost.
starting to look like him.
Almost,
Exactly.
yeah. No, that's right. That's right. Well, Tom, anything you want to add to this interview? Do you have anything coming up? You got any projects you want to plug?
When do I get the check from you guys? I'm just curious.
We'll get that off air. We'll figure that out off air.
We're gonna market
No, just
something.
if people want to know, they can go to tomdreesen.com. It's of course it's Tom, but everybody spells my last name wrong. But it's D as in David, REESEN. There's only one S. DREESEN.com. It'll tell you everything.
I never had a chance to share this with you, and it's not worth sharing, but I'm going to anyways. You said everybody gets Dreesen wrong. A couple of years ago, I put your number in my cell phone, and it was just Fat Thumbs. I knew how to spell your name, but it was Fat Thumbs, and I got you in my cell phone, Tom Dreesen. S-O-M. And I know that's not how you spell it, but I'm too lazy to change it. So you're Tom Dreesen to me. Sorry about that.
That's hysterical, yeah.
Yeah.
I ever tell you that I was getting off the plane in Chicago, and there was a woman came up to me at the baggage claim, and she said, "Oh, I'm your biggest fan. I think you're just a great entertainer. My husband said, could we get a picture together? And I said, sure. She said, Harold, hurry, come quick. It's Regis Philbin.
No way. Oh, that's great.
That's fantastic.
Well, Tom, thanks very much for your generosity and spending time with us today. And thank you for, you and I hooked up about 3 or 4 years ago. And thanks for, letting me call you back.
All right, guys, anytime.
How cool was that, Ronnie? Isn't that neat?
Man, he's top of the heap, man.
Yeah, you said it earlier. He's a class act.
He is a class act, and I mean, to live what he's lived.
That's right.
I mean, phew,
a lot of fun.
That's amazing.
The Ronnie and Bo podcast brought to you by Prescott Realty, PrescottRealty.com, or you can give them a call
at 928-499-8700. And when you call, it can be a no-commitment, free consultation. They're happy to talk, and so many different facets to real estate. They've got a specialist in every area that you could think of that will help you in your buying or selling. It's really the largest financial decision that you've got to make in your life, so why not go with someone you can trust? Serving the Prescott area since 1991. Prescott Realty. Give them a call.
Thanks for listening to the Ronnie and Bo Show, available on your favorite podcast provider. Please connect with the Ronnie and Bo Show on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and RonnieandBoShow.com. Send comments to RonnieandBoShow@gmail.com. This is your announcer speaking. I'm Shotgun Tom Kelly.